Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel Let's Talk Boxing. So I was re-watching Joshua Buatsi and Craig Spider Richards, and I get a knock at the door. And I open the door, and lo and behold, it's my mother and my brother. I'm delighted to see them, so I let them in. I sit them down. DAZN's on in the background, and I go off to make them a Chris Andre special coffee. You know, the ones I like to make. I look over my shoulder, and I notice that my mum is watching the fight intently. I'm surprised by this, but I finish making the coffee. I come back, I present her the coffee, and she decides that she's going to give me some technical insight. And she says, you know, Chris, these two, there's absolutely no way that they would have beaten Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Mum. Now my brother, as you can imagine, looks at her like there's something wrong with her, like, are you being serious right now? What are you banging on about? And her response is, what? It's true. You can ask anyone. So in case you didn't know, you know, that's the insight of my mum. So look out for a new boxing channel that could be coming soon. Mama Andre Boxing. You never know. She might be dropping some technical gems like that. Listen, whichever way you put it, she's bound to have more insight than someone like Dan Rayfield. Now, moving on from that, George Kambosos has put out a very funny tweet where he's basically mocking Devin Haney and Bill Haney for being fans of his. He's uploaded a video where it shows the home of Devin Haney and Bill Haney, and they're waiting for the results to be read out, the scorecards, and they are desperate for Kambosos to win the fight. When he is announced as the winner against Teofimo Lopez, they're jumping up and down like school kids. They look like proper fanboys of Kambosos. They're going absolutely nuts. They're delighted that he won the fight. Now, I put out a tweet to say this is a bit unusual to me, and, you know, from a mentality perspective, I find this interesting because if Haney saw Teofimo Lopez as an easy fight, like he claimed, and they disliked each other so much, surely he would have been the guy that would have wanted to have dethroned Teofimo Lopez. You're talking about a big money fight. You're talking about a grudge match. You know, if Canelo Alvarez was looking at the Golovkin-Murata fight and he knows this is a grudge match, it's a big money fight, he may see Golovkin as washed up now or past his best, a soft touch, big money fight. Surely he would want him to beat Murata. He wasn't rooting for Murata because that would have meant he's leaving millions on the table, right? So I had to question the mentality of Devin Haney, and I got two predominant responses for this from Devin Haney fans. The first response that was very common was, it's because he knew that George Kambosos was an easier fight. So why wouldn't you be happy? You're pretty much guaranteed to become undisputed now. Teofimo was a much harder fight. Well, if that's his mentality, doesn't that also portray psychological and mental weakness? Doesn't that suggest that he was somehow afraid of Teofimo Lopez, that he felt there was a significant risk that he could lose the fight? Whereas now he's relieved that that pressure has come off his shoulders. There was a second response, however, which actually portrays a strong mentality. And that is, Teofimo Lopez was not willing to fight Devin Haney. That he was going to give up the belts, people were saying. And he was going to go up to fight Josh Taylor. So as a result of that, he knew that if he wanted the shot at the undisputed, he needed George Kambosos to win the fight. Now, that would be a strong mentality because what it shows is that Haney is focused on ultimate success and dominance. And Teofimo was an obstacle to him, not because he was too good, but because he wasn't willing to fight him. Fair enough, I'll accept that. But then what that also does is it rubbishes another narrative that's coming out from Team Haney and from the LDBC in general. The LDBC seems to have adopted Devin Haney after Bill Haney made a few appearances on the Boxing Voice, and he was talking about how his son and Tank Davis's fans have similar fan base. The Boxing Voice's Ness and other people are firmly behind him. Since then, they've taken on a whole bunch of new fans. So they've adopted him and they're very vocal. You know, the typical sort of LDBC channels that were very vocal with Deontay Wilder and stuff like that. And they've made a claim that George Kambosos is essentially being forced into this fight. And this is something that has been reiterated by Bill and Devin himself, that he did not want this fight, but he had nowhere else to go because Devin Haney was willing to accept all the terms. And so what could he possibly do? While George Kambosos has been saying all along, don't be silly, no one was forced into it, you were chosen. Now, when you start to analyze this and you consider it, it becomes quite clear that George Kambosos was not forced into anything. This is a voluntary fight. This is not a mandatory. One of the criticisms for having the franchise belt is that you don't have mandatories. If he wanted to duck Devin Haney, he never would have had to have fought him. He could have fought any old bum outside the top 15 or top 20. And in Australia, homecoming fight, a lot of Australians that are going to be there would have been casual fans. He's got a big Greek Aussie community behind him. And just to put this into perspective, Melbourne is the city in the world that has more Greeks, ethnic Greeks, than any other after Athens. It has even more Greeks in it than Thessaloniki, which is the second biggest city in Greece. So you're talking about a lot of people who are going to get behind him from his own community. And of course, Australians as a whole, many of them are not even boxing fans. So he wouldn't have had to have had a big name to fight. They would have just billed it as the undisputed lightweight champion of the world. The one belt he doesn't have is a secondary title that was emailed to Devin Haney. He's never even won it in the ring. He hasn't even fought a legitimate top 10 lightweight, right? Go fight someone who's in the top 10 or the top 8 at least. Do something, Devin. Fight somebody who's for real. Hey, if your opponents are so good, I might fight them instead. Hey, how about I fight Jorge Linares here in Australia? How about I fight the small Jojo Diaz? I'll fight these guys. I don't need to fight Devin Haney. Who's Devin Haney? Go prove yourself first. That could have been the narrative that he used. And what could anyone have said? He would have made bundles of money without a risk. He chose to go down this route. Now, my aim is not to criticize Devin Haney here. I'm just trying to understand what the purpose is of what they're trying to do. What is the psychological warfare that they're trying to engage in here? Devin Haney deserves massive props for being willing to do something that a lot of American fighters simply are not willing to do. Big props to him for being willing to fight in Australia twice, for taking allegedly an 80-20 split against him in both fights. Now, listen, the 80-20 split in both fights, a lot of people are saying, well, AJ and Usyk, that didn't happen with them, but Usyk and AJ was a mandatory fight. So there didn't have to be a rematch at all. For voluntary fights, you always have a rematch clause lately. Is it fair? No, it's not what I like to see, to be honest with you. There should be a two-way rematch clause. That is what is fair. But this is something that's commonly done. Devin Haney did it to Jojo Diaz. So clearly, Team Haney don't have a problem with it. So why would they suggest there's a problem here? Secondly, look at this stadium here that George Kambosos is willing and able to sell out in Australia. 20% of that is likely to generate a lot more money for Devin Haney than 50% would in a rematch in America. This is why DAZN were not willing, according to Eddie Hearn, to invest to buy the fight, because they did not feel there was value in it in the United States. And Eddie Hearn himself, something that I've shown in a previous video, had said that he felt there were no excuses and that Devin Haney would have to probably accept less than he was willing to accept to make the fight happen, because he sees it as an investment. We've been overpaying you in the past in the hope that we can recoup what it is that we've invested in you in the future when you're a star. So now you have to be willing to accept more of what is your genuine value. So take this fight. His own promoter at the time was telling him that. So why are they pushing this idea that he had to take the fight? Is it just to give confidence to Devin Haney, to make him believe? Is this a psychological ploy to make him believe that Kambosos is scared? Or is it what Kambosos is saying and that they're seeking excuses? Like I said, he wanted Bill Haney over there. He lobbied senior officials in Australia to allow that to happen because he keeps saying they're going to find excuses after I smash him up. Maybe you feel that's what they're doing. Or maybe you actually do feel that Kambosos was forced into this fight. And if so, I want you to make the case why down below. Now let's move on from that and let's talk about a massive fight that's been announced. Canelo versus Golovkin 3. I'm really excited about this fight. I was really excited about it before the Bivol fight. But now there's an added element to it. There's added spice because they both have so much to lose. If Golovkin loses this fight, you would have to imagine that he's going to retire. If Canelo Alvarez loses this fight and he loses 2 fights in a row, where does he go from here? Will he still be the same cash cow, or will he start to lose a lot of those fans that are catching onto his coattails right now? Is he going to lose that popularity? Would he have to then go and fight a guy like Benavidez and hope that he wins that fight and recatapults himself into the big time again? Who knows? Well, whatever the case might be, we're seeing another narrative here emerge, which is again very, very unfair. There's been a lot of criticism of Canelo Alvarez looking to take this fight. They're saying that Gennady Golovkin is utterly washed. There's no point in taking it. This is a duck. He should be fighting Benavidez. He should be fighting Jermall Charlo. You know what the problem is with this narrative? The problem with this narrative is that Benavidez just fought a washed up old David Lemieux who looked like an old David Hasselhoff at the weigh-in. A washed up 40-year-old has-been lifeguard who just got rejected for the casting of the remake of Baywatch. My man had a dad bod. He was not in shape. He was terrible. This is a guy in his prime that lost to Gennady Golovkin. And a lot of the same people who are criticising Gennady Golovkin for not having a resume are suggesting that Benavidez-Lemieux is a legitimate top-class win. Now, when this fight was first announced, I actually thought it was a pretty solid fight because Benavidez can be hit and Lemieux carries power. But then when I saw the shape he was in, it became quite clear he was going to get blown away. Then you've got Jermall Charlo. Jermall Charlo's fighting an even more washed dude who was never as good as Lemieux in Seletsky. So why are the critics of Canelo holding these guys to a lower standard? We've heard already that Benavidez's manager was saying that he doesn't want the Andrade fight for less than 7 million. What's that all about? And I don't know what Charlo's playing at. Who are you guys fighting? Why are you fighting these guys? Fight each other. I mean, Canelo's literally going to fight a modern day great. They're both modern day greats. They're going to fight in the third fight of the trilogy. What has been 2 terrific fights that have preceded it. Controversy involved for the undisputed super middleweight championship of the world. This is historic. People are already talking in a way where it's going to build up interest straight away. You've got people like Simon H on Twitter who have said GGG will win but not get the decision. Canelo is literally 4 rounds up as we speak. So you know that Golovkin, who decided he was going to go on the front foot in the first fight as Canelo went on the back foot. In the second fight, Canelo came forward. It was Golovkin boxing off the back foot. I personally felt Golovkin won both fights but didn't get the decision in either. Well, this time around, he's not going to leave it down to the judges. He knows he's got to go for it. He may not even have the stamina to box at the intensity he did for the first 2 fights for 12 rounds. So he might have to put his foot on the gas. This could be a barn burner. This could be an epic. This could be the best fight of the 3, regardless of the outcome. And you're going to hold it against Canelo for taking this fight? This is historic. The other guys have to be held to a greater standard. They need to start fighting each other if they want to get the shot at Canelo and want to catapult themselves into the stratosphere of greatness. Now, moving on from that, let's talk about Tank Davis and Rolly Romero and Tank and Floyd Mayweather. Davis gave an interview with the Last Stand podcast. It was filmed on April the 7th but released on May the 23rd. And he was asked, has the time come for Tank Davis to take control of his own career and leave Mayweather Promotions? He said it doesn't necessarily have to be leaving Mayweather Promotions, but it's about, becoming a man and handling your own responsibility, your own priority. I feel as though it's my career, so I feel as though I need to be able to control my career, if you know what I mean. And it's time. Everybody doesn't need to have training wheels on them forever. It's time to ride their own bike without the training wheels. So Costa asked again, so is this your last fight with Mayweather Promotions? And Davis replied, yes, sir. Now, since then, Eddie Hearn has come out and said, listen, we're not making an offer for Tank Davis. We wouldn't do that to anybody who's under contract. But if he was not to be under contract, we would love to sign him. Just for the banter with Leonard Ellaby. Of course, he's had a back and forth with Leonard Ellaby, and it's been very, very entertaining to say the least. But the point is, that's kind of like tapping up in football, right? Where you're basically not allowed to tell a player you want to sign him if he's under contract, but you just drop a little loose word or two just to let the world know that, yeah, I'm interested in buying him, and the player knows not to sign a contract. Well, there you go. That's what seems to be happening here. It would be a fantastic move for Tank Davis to sign with Matchroom and DAZN, in my opinion. Let me know what you think about that. Moving on from that, Joyce and Joseph Parker has been pushed back. The fight will now not be occurring until September. This is because Andy Lee, who is the trainer of Joseph Parker, is expecting a baby, or his wife rather is expecting a baby in July. And Frank Warren was a little bit upset at this. He was like, they could have let us know. It's not like a baby just comes out of the blue. They would have known it was due. So he's a bit annoyed, but Joyce said, no problem, move it back to September. In the meantime, I will fight someone else in the interim. I can't imagine it being anybody of any note, but nonetheless, he wants to stay active. And I like the way he's moving. He's basically saying, listen, I'm going to be out here taking care of business, smashing men up, and when you're ready, I'll take care of you too. I'm liking the energy from Joyce. Do you think it suits Joyce or Parker? Maybe you think Parker is going to benefit from more time to analyse Joyce. He's going to see him take on another opponent. It gives him an extra something to look into. Or will it help Joyce because he'll be the one who's more active? Let me know what you think. Moving on from that, some very sad news. Gary Russell Snr has passed away at the tender age of 63. That really is no age in this day and age. He had type 2 diabetes, however. He'd suffered multiple strokes. He had his foot amputated in December, struggling with that diabetes. So it was a very painful end, and, may God rest his soul. My sympathies go out to his family. Gary Russell Jr., of course, is his son, as are the fantastic prospects in Gary Antoine Russell, a light middleweight fighter who I've spoken about before on this channel. He's a little bit crude, but he is one serious physical specimen. You can check out his fight against Boots Ennis, by the way, in the amateurs. A really good fight to watch. And of course, there's the bantamweight contender, Gary Antonio Russell. So Gary Russell Sr. leaves behind a legacy that he can be proud of. I'm sure his sons are going to go on to achieve an awful lot more in the sport. They've already achieved so much. So it's a loss for the sport of boxing. A respected trainer passes away. God rest his soul. Moving on from that, let's talk about something a little bit more light-hearted to end the episode. Rolly Romero has decided that he's going to wear some Prince-themed boxing shoes. You can see there are blue and purple. There's some lightning strikes on them, some coloured stones. He's got the words Purple Rain written on the heel as well. So I'm guessing that you can guess what song he's going to walk down to the ring to against Tank Davis. He has talked the talk. He is one hilarious dude, man. He is so funny. His interviews, to me, pound for pound, he's got to be the funniest dude in boxing right now. Possibly unintentionally funny. I don't know half the time if he's joking or being serious, but he's like a caricature. He's just such a funny character. And you like to see this in boxing. At least I do anyway. From the banter to the attire, and a lot of fighters seem to be catching on to this. We're seeing some over-the-top ring walks and attires now going on. You see Boots Ennis with some of the longest tassels you'll ever see. Pink as well. He's not afraid to wear pink. That's how you know you've got to be a bad boy when you're willing to enter a macho sport like that with pink tassels, dressed like you're about to go to a Mardi Gras parade or something. And then you've got Tyson Fury, of course. He looks like he's about to get the trumpets out in his latest fight at the World Cup for the England national team and start playing The Great Escape, does he not? He's with one big England flag. Look at him. And then you've got people like Errol Spence, who came out dressed like Big Bird from Sesame Street. Either way, whichever way you look at it, it's highly entertaining to me. I'm enjoying it. I'm loving to see these characters show themselves. And, you know, it adds a package. It adds icing and cherries to the cake that is the sport itself. Let me know what you think about everything we've spoken about today. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to hit a jab on that like button, a right cross on that subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Take care. God bless.